4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to edition 73 of BBK's podcast. If you are listening to the MP3 version of this, you got to enjoy the sultry sounds of Fiona Apple. But if you're just watching this live, unfortunately, you're introduced with my great voice. But this is your host, Brian Bullock, and with me for the Thanksgiving edition of the podcast is Spreadapedia. How's it going, Spread?
Pretty good. Nice to be here.
Glad to have you. So are you all ready for Thanksgiving? Do you get everything set as far as food and bets and all that stuff is concerned?
I still have a couple more bets to make. There's a couple college basketball games tomorrow that are looking nice, but yeah, pretty much ready to go.
Okay. Now let's get started. This is going to be one of those hodgepodge podcasts that you've probably listened to a few times as of late. Not as much gambling centric as we're used to, but we figured we would start out here with your NFeLony. I'm not sure if that's how you're pronouncing it, but the tournament that you basically drew up a little bracket, 64 teams, if you will, and I kind of want to hear your thoughts on how you came about starting that, because it seemed like it started with the discussion of the Greg Hardy stuff and how people were perceiving that to be the worst thing an NFL player's ever done. But I think was that where it started?
Pretty much that was sort of the genesis of it. I was just sort of amazed at the number of hot takes on Greg Hardy that were coming from every direction. And, you know, I'm not, you know, I don't disagree that Greg Hardy sounds like a pretty terrible person. And, you know, he's probably not even a very good teammate. But I just thought all the stuff I was hearing about him being a monster who should never be allowed to play in the NFL again just seemed so reactionary that it kind of got me thinking. And, you know, I'm not so much anymore. I love the NFL, but I don't focus on it as much as I did, say, when I was 15 or 20 or even 25. But I'm a student of history and a student of NFL history, and I just felt that people were kind of overrating Greg Hardy's evilness compared to, you know, any number of players in recent memory. And so it sort of got me thinking, and I remember I tweeted something out that, you know, Greg Hardy wouldn't even be a 1 seed or a 2 seed if you were to bracket the worst players in NFL history. And I decided to actually make a bracket, and that was sort of the genesis for the NFeLony Madness tournament.
Okay, so are people now, given the tournament was inspired by him, are people that you've interacted with who may or may not be interested in this, are they surprised at the seed that you actually did give him?
Hardy in particular, not really, but there definitely been a lot of disagreements, and people are you know, people have asked me, why is so and so a 1 seed or a 2 seed, or, you know, Ray Caruth is a 3 seed. A lot of people disagreed with that.
I think maybe if the kid would have died.
Well, I mean, Ray Caruth is getting out of jail in like 2018 or something. So I had to look a lot of this stuff up and refamiliarize myself with different players and the stuff they did. And the reason Ray Caruth got a 3 seed is because he's actually getting out of jail relatively soon. So couldn't give him a 1 seed if he's not in prison.
So it's a combination of what they did plus how much they got punished?
It's a combination of what they did, how they got punished. Consideration was given to when it occurred in their career and if they returned. You know, for example, like Ray Lewis killed a guy, or allegedly killed a guy, and, you know, charged with obstruction of justice. And Leonard Little killed somebody driving drunk, and they both came back and played in Super Bowls. So, you know, that I put them higher for stuff like that. Sort of as the seeding went on, I mean, it's really hard to actually find 64 people in NFL history who are deserving of this. And not so much finding them, but seeding them accurately sort of became harder as it went on. So a lot of guys, I mean, don't take the seeds particularly seriously. I mean, it was just hard to fit guys in near the end, which is why like Brett Favre was a 15 seed. Is he really a bad guy? No, I mean he's just on the list because of the he's the godfather of the dick picture movement.
Okay, I was gonna ask because I didn't remember him committing any crimes outside of like the ducks that he threw on the field, aside and then also the dick pics. But
yeah, I mean, 15 seeds aren't really projected to advance, so I just needed filler near the end, and I was like, oh, Brett Favre, the dick pics.
So he's the Coppin State of the bracket.
Pretty much, he's not advancing out of the first round, and rightfully so.
Okay, so with the players that you did seed one, go through to give a sense of what they did to earn, I guess, a number one seed.
Well, Ray Lewis is pretty well known. You know, he allegedly was involved in the murder of somebody at the Super Bowl. I think it was 2002. I might be wrong on the exact year of that, but
he was right after their first Super Bowl, I think.
No, it was the year before.
The year before,
the Ravens won the Super Bowl, which makes it even better because he came back and won the Super Bowl after pleading guilty to obstruction of justice.
Okay, I forgot exactly what year it was, but I knew it was right around there.
But so I've always thought that Ray Lewis, like when I see Ray Lewis on ESPN lecturing people about stuff, I'm like, you killed a guy, you know, and you're on TV lecturing people. It's just insane. Lawrence Phillips is pretty well known. I mean, he was in jail in college. He did all sorts of things. I mean, he's a pretty big favorite to advance to the Final Four in this bracket. He killed a guy in prison recently, so he just keeps getting points basically. Aaron Hernandez is well known. He killed somebody, and actually, I'll take that back. He didn't kill somebody. He ordered somebody killed. He didn't fire the gun, which I think is going to hurt him as the tournament progresses. Not firing the murder weapon yourself is in my book, I don't think he's going to win. A lot of people think he's the favorite, but I mean, we'll argue that later on in the tournament that he didn't fire the gun. But he got a 1 seed because he's popular and well known. Leonard Little, who I've tweeted about several times over several years, is just a football player I despise. He drove drunk and killed a lady, like plowed into her car and killed her. And I think he was suspended for like 8 games because of that, maybe. But he ended up coming back and playing on the Rams teams that went to the Super Bowl. And I always just thought like that was really fucked up. He actually killed somebody driving drunk, and I mean he was suspended like 8 games, and no one gave a shit at the time. Like it wasn't even it was written about and people talked about it, but that's sort of like what I was saying earlier is Greg Hardy is a monster, but Leonard Little isn't considered a monster, and he actually killed somebody driving drunk, and I always thought that was fucked up.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that though? Because I think that too much is expected of the NFL to like punish these people further, whereas like it should really be up to the justice system to punish these people to the ultimate degree. If they kill somebody, they shouldn't even they should be locked up. Like they shouldn't even have the chance to.
Yeah, and that's sort of comes back to the original point of people just kind of having a fucked up view on a lot of this stuff. I don't know why people expect the NFL to jump in and be the criminal justice system here. That's not their job. which isn't to say that players shouldn't be held accountable, because I do agree that players should be held accountable for their actions.
Sure.
But, if you're angry at the NFL for not suspending Greg Hardy, you should be much more angry at the criminal justice system. And that's sort of like I have to be somewhat careful about what I say, because I don't want people to twist my words and make me sound like a monster. But that's sort of one of the things that bothers me specifically about Greg Hardy, is that, ESPN and NBC in particular. NBC is incredibly guilty of this, but so are all the other networks. NBC has used Greg Hardy to promote multiple Cowboys games this season. And part of that reason, I believe, is because Tony Romo was injured and Des Bryant was injured, and there was really no narrative to sell on the game. So they had to kind of wedge Greg Hardy into the discussion to sell Sunday Night Football. And the Cowboys, the Cowboys are always on prime time because they're the Cowboys. But when you don't have Romo, you don't have Des Bryant, you need something to sell the game. And I just think it's dirty and wrong for these networks to be, pushing this Greg Hardy's a monster, Greg Hardy should be in jail, this and that, and then turn around and use them to sell the games. And especially in NBC's case, where they have Bob Costas talking for 5 minutes straight about Greg Hardy, and Tony Dungy and Mike Florio. And I can't stand listening to them to begin with, but having to listen to them give their views on morality and everything, I mean, they just need to shut the fuck up. It's disgusting.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And that's probably why I don't watch much of the pregame. And if I do, it's usually on mute or very low volume, so I'm not bothered by it.
I'll usually turn on the NBC pregame because it kind of fills that hour in between the end of the late games and Sunday Night Football. I swear I turned it on a couple weeks ago and I heard Bob Costas talking about Greg Hardy, and I turned around to look back at my computer, and I looked back at the TV like 5 minutes later, and I was like, wow, he's still talking. It's just it's absurd, and it's nobody's really pointing that out, that these that the networks use Greg Hardy to promote their programs as much as they want him to hang for his crimes.
Sure.
And I don't know. I find that stuff interesting.
No, I agree. I'm kind of curious to see how the coverage will be of that tomorrow. Although Thanksgiving usually lends itself to a more family-friendly atmosphere, so maybe they won't discuss it as much, especially with Romo back. But we'll have to wait and see.
I also I find it interesting on the way I look at football and how I think about football is you're looking for the most talented players, and Greg Hardy is one of the best defensive ends in football. And I wish people could separate that from his personal life. And that sort of, people kind of want things to work both ways. They want Greg Hardy to be held accountable, and they don't want to recognize his talent. And that's kind of ridiculous, because the NFL is based on star players getting away with things that normal people don't get because they're talented and they're irreplaceable. That's how the world works. Not just football, but that's how the world works. So I don't get it.
No, yeah, and if you really took a look at somebody, there's probably people in your company, not saying your company, but I'm saying this to anybody, that have some kind of history to their background that you might find despicable, but if they're good enough at their job, odds are, as long as it's not too blasphemous, they're going to get hired.
I can separate the person from the athlete, in any case. And as an athlete, as a football player, I would love to have Greg Hardy on my team. He is a champion caliber football player who can impact a game. Do you want him in your community? I don't know, probably not, but that's really not for me to decide. So, out of my control.
Yeah, I think we're in the same boat there. So, So with the research that you did do for this, was there any particular crimes that you had forgotten about that maybe caught you off guard once you reread about them?
There were a couple interesting ones. I'm a fan of Chris Carter in particular because if you look at his early career, he was a cocaine addict who was potentially point shaving. There's a good book that I highly recommend. It's called Interference. I think it's by Dan Modella. It was written in like 1986. I highly recommend people who are interested in, the shady side of football to take a look at that book. There's also a PBS Frontline documentary from like 1982 or 1983 that shines a lot of light on different subjects on football. And again, this is one of the things I just kind of wanted people to understand is that this isn't a new thing. This isn't a new phenomenon of football that, players are doing bad things. It just happens that the media is reporting things in a different way now. There's a 24-hour news cycle in ESPN, and they manufacture stories. And it used to not be like this. In the 70s and 80s, players can get away with a lot of more things because, it wasn't reported the same way. But
Sure.
of the guys that interest me the most that I had forgot about was Darrell Russell of I think Oakland Raiders fame. He was like the first overall pick, and I think he and some other guys were like filming women, like giving them GHB and filming themselves raping women, which was like I was like, whoa, I forgot about that. He's dead now, by the way.
I guess he had that coming.
Yeah, Jeremy Stevens is another one. He's one of my dark horses. I've always felt that he was a pretty despicable dude, and I just think that his career he wasn't a very very good player. So I don't think he's gotten a lot of the negative spotlight that he deserves. I mean, he's, as Katie Nolan would call him, a garbage human being. He is a real garbage human.
Yeah.
But the matchup that interests me the most, and I might write about this later on, and the reason the tournament's been delayed is because I actually wanted to put up Google polls and sort of streamline everything so it became more interactive and runs better. But the number 10 seed in one of the brackets is Paul Hornung and Alex Karras, who might not be particularly familiar to a lot of people because, I mean, they're from the 60s. And
anyone who's watched, was it Webster?
Yeah.
Knows who Alex Karras is.
Well, Hornung is particularly interesting. He's sort of like the original Johnny Manziel. Like he was Lombardi's starting running back. They called him the Golden Boy. Even in college, he's the last player. I don't know if he's the only player, but at least the last to win a Heisman on a losing team. And he was the original, front cover of Sports Illustrated football player who was going out and drinking and partying with whores all night. And he was suspended. Him and Alex Karras were suspended for the entire 1963 season for betting on football games and associating with, mobsters and gamblers. And the story goes that Hornung was betting on Packer games or whatever, but the truth of the matter is more likely that a lot of the Green Bay Packers were betting on their games, and Hornung just took the fall for the team, which is incredibly fascinating if you're a student of history, because what I said earlier about there not being a 24-hour news cycle in the 1960s. Can you imagine if Vince Lombardi had 24 hours a day on SportsCenter alleging that one of his players was betting and potentially throwing Packer games? I mean, that changes the entire history of the NFL. And I find that, incredibly fascinating because many players on those 1960s Packers teams ended up being head coaches or assistant coaches and effectively molding the NFL as we know it today. And I mean, could you imagine? I mean, Lombardi was the original Belichick in that sense, that he had, I don't know what you would call it, gambling gate or something. But like I said, it could have changed the entire history of the NFL. So I find that matchup particularly interesting.
Yeah, that's something. Now that you mention it, I knew about Karras, but I didn't realize that Paul had a hand in anything like that, or the Packers in general back then. That's something I think I'm going to need to read more about now that you mention it.
Yeah, and I was thinking when it gets to that point for that part of the bracket, I might write something up on it because it's fairly interesting to me at least.
Okay, so let's wrap this up before we go into video games talk. Who do you have? Who do you expect people to be voting into the Final Four, or who would you put into the Final Four, and then who would you have winning it?
Who do I have winning it? Let's see. So the Final Four, I think I actually ran the brackets out once just to see what I thought it would look like. I think you'll probably get a Ray Lewis, Darren Sharper matchup that'll be highly contested. Brandon Marshall is one of my dark horses. I think the bracket with Brandon Marshall, you got Brandon Marshall, Leonard Little, Parrish Cox, and Ray Caruth, all making strong cases. Then you got Hernandez, Daryl Henley, who I went over briefly on Twitter like a week ago. He paid a hitman to attempt to assassinate the judge in his cocaine trial. So that might actually, I'm looking forward to the Henley Hernandez second round matchup. Then you got Ben Roethlisberger and Jeremy Stevens making a push in that bracket. And then in the bottom bracket, you got Lawrence Phillips, who is almost guaranteed, except that he has O.J. Simpson and Jovan Belcher to contend with. And I personally think Jovan Belcher is going to be the guy to beat, especially because I read a lot of the court filings and stuff around him. I mean, it's going to be pretty hard to beat a guy who killed himself in front of, the coaching staff after murdering his fiance or whatever. So
didn't he murder his fiance in front of his kid too, or
he murdered his fiance in front of his mother after having a discussion with her about the paternity of their child. Then drove to the team practice facility and shot himself in the head in front of the head coach and the defensive coordinator and the general manager and whoever. And then his team played the next day like nothing happened.
Yeah, I think they actually won. That was one of their bad seasons, and I think that was one of their 2 or 3 victories that year.
Yeah, right? I think they won the next day.
Yeah, yeah.
But then OJ, the whole thing with OJ, and a lot of people, I probably got more questions about that than anything, is why is OJ a 6th seed? And he's a 6th seed because he was found not guilty of murder. So I couldn't bump him up for a crime he was found not guilty of. The only thing I could include him in was his robbery conviction in Nevada, which he's currently serving prison time for.
Sure.
So he's a 6th seed based on that.
Yeah, and civil suits don't get you 1 seeds. People.
Yeah, civil suits definitely don't get you a 1 seed in this. And I'm actually, I mean, I'd really like at some point to post some O.J. Simpson highlights because, again, he was a model citizen during his NFL career, and I think it's unfortunate that his activities outside of football have taken away from him as a football player, because he should be known as one of the finest running backs of all time, and not just a murderer, but a Hall of Fame running back who happened to probably have killed his wife.
Yeah, and if I remember right, the 2,000-yard season that he had, that was in a 14-game.
Yeah, 14-game season.
So he would have. So the record that stands right now, I mean, even if you give him 70 yards each of those next games, he would have that record easily. But I digress. So let's go into the next topic here. This is more of the random topic here. We have video game madness here, and I wanted to break break this off a little bit with some random topics because podcasts can get kind of boring if we're just talking about betting all the time. So I know we've talked about Nintendo stuff. I've seen you post Nintendo stuff about, and there's the cat. Hi, cat. And I was wondering, I wanted to hear your first video game experience because I can remember mine. I can remember when I got my first video game system and all that. And I'm sure that you have a similar memory that I do. But if you could describe your first video game experience, the system, the game, the year, if you could remember that.
I don't remember the exact year, but I was probably 3-4 years old. I had an NES. I can't even tell you where exactly it came from because I was young, but I grew up with an NES, and then I got a Super Nintendo. But so I grew up with the classic Nintendo games, and that's where I got my start. Where I actually got more interested and involved with video games was when I was about 13. I worked at a used video game store that was actually, I didn't know any of this at the time, but I learned more of this later on. But it was actually more of a fence for electronics. But I didn't know because I was 13 and I got paid cash every day. So I thought it was fucking awesome. I got to play video games and, we never had any customers. None of it ever occurred to me how odd it was, but it was just a little small independent video game store. And later on, when I was in college, I remember reading the newspaper one day and finding out that the owner of the store who had hired me and who I had, spent a lot of time with as a 13-year-old had been busted for selling stolen goods and was, part of a ring or something that was selling stolen video games. And, it all made sense then. And I was like, oh, but I literally had no idea at the time. I was just a 13-year-old playing video games in an empty store.
Sure. Yeah, no, I got my Nintendo, I think, when I was like 4 or 5. I think that was the same year my dad, who I'm not going to call him Santa because, sorry, kids, if you're listening, Santa doesn't exist. I could tell it was his handwriting, now that I'm thinking about it years later. But I opened it up and just geeked out. And I think the first game I ever played on it was the MLB game. I think it was just called MLB Baseball. I'm not really sure, but the one thing I remember from that game was that you couldn't throw from third to first and get the guy out. You had to throw like home to first. It was something like that. It was something bizarre that when you're little, you're trying to figure out the best ways to beat games, and if you can't throw from third to first to get a guy out, I mean, it just seems so bizarre. But I don't know. I'm curious on your Nintendo overrated and underrated games because my personal underrated, and it's probably my favorite Nintendo game, is Baseball Stars.
Stars, yeah.
And it was just because looking back on it, it was so ahead of its time in terms of building a team, kind of like a dynasty team. And this was like made in '89 or something like that. So, I mean, the more I thought about it, the more I realized how kind of groundbreaking it seemed to be. The original one, I think there was some knockoff versions, but I remember the first one being just really cool to play. I liked the feel to it, and it just, I don't know. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you consider some of the more underrated and overrated Nintendo games.
Underrated and overrated.
And maybe underrated might be easier. Maybe something that maybe didn't catch the eye of many people but that you liked.
Overrated is kind of tough. I mean, there's so many. I mean, video games have all of a sudden become popular, or at least retro video games, which blows my mind. And sometimes I'll see the prices on Craigslist or eBay, and people are charging $20-$25 for a copy of Mario 3. And I think that's insane. I mean, those were going for nothing when I worked at a video game store, and when I would buy stuff on eBay. I mean, I couldn't I couldn't get rid of that stuff. Now people are paying for it, and I was probably a little too early to the video game scene in that regard, sadly. But underrated, I don't know. I always felt the Super Mario Lost Levels, the second Mario, was the original Super Mario 2 was underrated. That game is really hard and fun to play if you like challenging games. Kung Fu, I always enjoyed that game. Never thought it got the respect it deserved.
I don't think I own that.
You should. It's great. Kid Icarus. I don't know if that's technically underrated, but it's very similar to Metroid, but Metroid gets all the credit and Kid Icarus doesn't. Both fantastic video games. Train.
Train.
DuckTales. I like DuckTales. I always thought that game didn't get the credit it deserved, and is a fun playthrough, you know, side-scrolling action game.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
I've actually sold most of my Nintendo collection just because the prices on a lot of the rare stuff have gotten so out of hand that it was like what I did is I have a Nintendo Wii, and I modded it to be able to play, you know, emulators and different systems. It could basically play any system up to like PlayStation or Nintendo 64 or Sega Saturn. And I attached a hard drive to it, a removable SSD drive that holds, you know, 100 gigs of games or whatever. So I was able to just digitalize most of my collection, and I'm not particularly attached to any of the cartridges, and they take up space. So when I saw that people were paying, you know, upwards of 80 or $100 per game for some of the rare games, I was just like, hey, if you want to pay for this stuff, by all means, let me clear some shelf space. And
sure,
you know, it's worked out.
Yeah, you have quite the collection there. From what I remember of a picture that you had of your bin of games, I mean, it looked like about or shelf of games. I forgot. It seemed like 100 games or so.
Probably close to less than 100. Used to be larger, but I've cut it down significantly.
Okay. Did you ever own like anything before Nintendo, like an Atari or anything?
No, I don't think I owned any pre-NES systems. I have emulators for them, but you know, I don't even play them. Like, what the fuck am I gonna do with a ColecoVision?
I don't know. I was gonna see what your thoughts on Pitfall were. You know, but
I mean, I know what it is, and I never really played it.
Okay, all right. So when it comes to the Nintendo games that you own or that you've played, I know you've discussed or you've mentioned to people that I think Zelda was one of the games that you would respect, or if I'm not mistaken, Zelda was one of the games that you'd respect if they had actually beaten it. Was that right?
Oh no, that's Zelda for the Nintendo 64. I always tell people that if you want to win a free account to Spreadapedia, prove to me that you can beat the Water Temple without using a guide, because that's pretty much impossible. And if you could do that, you get a free account.
Okay, so you also mentioned the Super Mario 2 Lost Worlds. What other games do you give props to for people being able to beat without cheating? Because I know Contra is probably one of those that I've never heard of anyone beating without the.
That's what I was gonna say. Is beating Contra without using the Konami code is a feat of excellence, and I don't even think I've ever done it. I mean, it took me, no joke, it probably took me till I was like probably 15 to be able to beat the first level of Contra without dying, you know?
Sure.
So beating the game is still several years off. But the Konami code, it's easy to run through. That's actually a game I run through every once in a while for fun. It's good
and I've never heard of anybody not using the Konami code, so it just seems like you have to use it.
Oh, you gotta. That's why it exists.
Is it? Would you say that's the best cheat code that's around for any system or cheats in general?
Yeah, I mean, either that or the infinite money the infinite money cheat in SimCity is pretty useful
Oh,
if you like
yeah,
playing SimCity, which I do.
I remember that. That was probably mid to late '90s, if I remember.
Yep, Super Nintendo. I finally beat that like last summer.
Oh, I was thinking about the computer version, but I didn't actually realize they made it for video games.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I have some other lists here of the best. We already mentioned cheat code. The best or maybe toughest boss to beat.
Toughest boss to beat. Um, yeah, I don't really know off the top of my head. Probably like one of the Castlevania games. Those are pretty tough.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of really hard Nintendo games. I mean, and I don't really play or follow uh new games like current video games. I don't own any of the new systems, but the old video games are just like incredibly hard. And I'm still, there's games I've owned for 20 years that I haven't beaten the way it should be.
Yeah.
Zanak. I don't know how many people have ever played a shoot 'em up called Zanak, but I mean that's one of the hardest games I've ever played.
Okay.
That's why I play it, is because it's so hard.
Yeah. And you might be the exception because I know most people would want to dominate something like if you're playing a franchise in Madden, so many people have 19-0 seasons. If they're not gonna if they lose a game, they're gonna turn the system off or something like that. So
The only
like,
games I really play now, like frequently, is I play Tetris, both of the regular Nintendo versions. I would eventually one day like to compete in the Tetris World Championship. The reason I haven't done it the last couple of years. It's because it's in the middle of football season in like October, and I've watched the videos, and I'm probably good enough to qualify for the field of 32, but I don't think I would get out of the first or second round, and I really can't justify flying to Portland for a tournament if I know I'm not gonna get out of the first round. So
sure.
I still practice occasionally, but I'm not sure I'm gonna get good enough to compete. And then
Okay.
I play Street Fighter, Street Fighter Alpha 2 in particular. That's probably my like go-to game after a day of gambling, when I just want to beat the crap out of something for a couple minutes. I'm pretty good at
So
that.
okay. All right. You're the best Mario-based game, and that could be for any system.
Best Mario-based game for any system. Probably a tie between Mario World and Mario 3. Um, Maybe Mario RPG. I'm a big fan of that game. That's a very fun game if you're into the Super Nintendo era RPGs. Never really got into the post N64 Mario stuff, other than I just played the Mario Maker game recently on the Wii U, and then that's pretty fun. I can get behind that whole concept.
Okay. Yeah. No, I would have to go with either Mario 3 or Mario Kart for N64. Just kind of dating myself from the college years. Just remembering the times I would stay up till 5 or 6 in the morning with dorm mates playing Rainbow Road, and actually playing all 16 races back to back. I think my favorite one of my favorite things, if somebody could do it, I respect them a lot in video gaming, is if you could complete that cheat in Rainbow Road. I don't know if you've played that much or lately, but where you could hop off to the left and land on the other side of the road, and you're like halfway through the course. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's been a while since I've played Mario Kart. Surprisingly,
Okay.
that was one of the games I never really got into.
Okay.
I would play F-Zero X for hours and hours at a time. I would do time trials in that game, trying to get
Okay.
like the absolute fastest time on certain tracks, and I've spent a lot of time doing that.
Okay. Yes, I'm just dating myself. I think I would say Mario 3 over Mario Kart, but Mario Kart's in there just because of the college factor, all the hours wasted on that. Because I really don't remember much about college, but I do remember playing a lot of Mario Kart. So, okay, so the best version of Madden.
Ooh, best version of Madden. I don't know. I probably stopped playing Madden around like 2008, maybe. Good 5-year period. I owned all the Maddens between like 2002 and 2008, maybe. But after that, after the PS2 era, I never got into the new games.
Okay.
So I don't even know because it's been so long since I've played any of them. I don't remember which version is slightly better than the other. Um, I would play Madden. I played NCAA football more. I enjoyed being able to run the option, and I thought that game was slightly more fun for like a playing with other people setting.
Sure. No, yeah, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I remember having a Super Nintendo game with NCAA, and I think it might have just been called NCAA football, but I do remember enjoying that one. All right, so the next question: the most dominant video game character or player?
Best huh.
Most dominant, like maybe one that, like, if you and your friends were playing each other, and like you guys might say like, you can't use this team because of him. Like obviously, Bo Jackson comes to mind, but
Yeah, I was gonna get into that because I knew you were gonna ask me about Tecmo Bowl, but I think Bo Jackson has become so talked about in that game that he's actually overrated.
Okay.
I blame Bill Simmons for that. But in terms like players, I mean, Street Fighter, like I know certain Street Fighter tournaments, they won't let you use in the original Street Fighter 2, they won't let you use Dulcim or Guile in tournament play because if you know how to do their moves correctly, it's like practically unblockable.
Okay.
I think I'd say probably because I play Street Fighter more than anything that it's like you can't even play as Guile in tournaments because you'll just get your ass kicked. Unblockable.
Okay. I know. We always frowned upon people playing as Odd Job and GoldenEye, just because of how short and really not much of a target. But
That game GoldenEye, like I know everyone loves it, and I got no problem with it, but I could never get into the 4-player multiplayer because that shit made me motion sick. So I would never play that. I'd just be like, nah, you guys play. I'll sit here and watch till I throw
yeah,
up.
and I know a lot of people. I know that there's some people that will say, "Oh, Perfect Dark was better." And Perfect Dark might be an underrated game, but I still like GoldenEye better than that. All right, so Blind Capper asked what your favorite NES game of all time is. Is it Street Fighter?
Well, no, Street Fighter is for Super Nintendo.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Regular Nintendo. Honest answer is probably Tetris. But there's two versions of Tetris. There's the regular version that everyone has, and then there's a version made by Tengen, which was a Atari imprint, and they ended up getting sued by Nintendo for making illegal cartridges. Essentially, there's a whole backstory to it about how Nintendo used certain physical manufacturing locks, and Atari tried to get around it. But the Tengen version of Tetris is probably the best and truest version of Tetris and most enjoyable. I think copies still probably sell for upwards of $100 for it because they're so rare. But that's probably my favorite game. The Ninja Turtles arcade game is probably the most fun to play with other people. Still enjoy Turtles in Time for the Super Nintendo. That's a masterpiece.
Okay. All right. Let's see. This was another Madden one. I should have tied this in, but Necessary Paper was asking your go-to playing Madden on third down.
Fullback dive.
Okay. I know you were suggesting.
They're never expecting it.
I know you were suggesting that in the Jags Titans game last week instead of the punt.
Well, I suggest that in every game. Fullback dive, weak side fullback sweep, strong side halfback sweep. Classic football. Run the ball, control the clock. It's not that hard, and it's kind of one of the things that bugs me about the NFL is I really don't think that most coaches really have a concept of game management. And we always hear people complain about how NFL coaches can't manage the last 2 minutes or 4 minutes of the game. But the reality is most coaches can't manage the entirety of the game. And running clock in the third quarter, even the second quarter, is sometimes just as important as running out the last 2 minutes. And you just don't see long 6-8 minutes sustained drives very often anymore. And it takes away from the enjoyment of good football.
Okay, so the fullback dive.
Fullback dive should be in every team's playbook.
I don't think my fullback scored much in dynasty leagues in Madden. So you probably lost me there. I'd probably opt for the single back. I wouldn't say dive, but maybe I was a big fan of the counter.
Counter, I don't know, on third down, I don't like running a counter on third down because you got that extra step. If they blow it up, you're done. I just want my fullback to plow ahead. That's his job.
Maybe not third down, but I think that was my go-to first down play was the counter. Okay, so we have a bunch of questions here from Ryan Blansett. He was asking your favorite Battletoad.
I've never really played Battletoads. I know it's one of the really, really hard games that people always complain about being too hard. I don't know. There's a lot of games I just never really got into or played, and a lot of stuff like later on when I was a teenager and I worked at a video game store, I would buy a lot of when people would come in to sell stuff. If I saw they had anything particularly good, I would usually buy it for myself and resell it, or I held on to some stuff. But that's sort of how I ended up with a nice collection of rare video games. But a lot of the stuff like the mainstream normal stuff that people talk about, I just never really played it or got into it.
Okay, so kind of video game hipster almost.
Well, not even like a hipster. My experience with video games was always more on the business side of it than the being a gamer side of it. I've just always been interested in the different systems and the whole business of it.
Okay, all right. Another one of his questions was, I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation, but is it Ikari Warriors or
Ikari Warriors?
Top 10 or top 5 is what he asked.
Probably it depends. You're talking about the arcade version versus the NES version. Arcade version's probably like a top 10 arcade game. Arcade games themselves are pretty cool, especially now that you can emulate MAME on pretty much anything from a Wii or an Xbox to your phone. I mean, mobile phones can emulate MAME and pretty much all systems pretty competently. So it's kind of cool. Like the Simpsons arcade game is one of my favorites and pretty frequently comes up on everyone's favorite list. And you could play that now on your phone, or you play it on a Wii with 4 controllers. I like stuff like that.
Okay.
Ikari Warriors is fun. That's an original what's it called? Neo Geo game or something. I forget if Neo Geo is the company or the system.
Okay. I would. Neo Geo, I think, is the system, but I'm not sure.
Neo Geo is the system. SNK is the company.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember in Baseball Stars there was the SNK Crushers or something.
Yeah.
I remember if I'm remembering that right. All right, and then his last one was, what's the street value of the weed in the game Narc?
Off the top of my head, I have no idea. That's another game I don't know much about.
Okay. And then we had we had a guy with pretty much Nintendo in his handle, Tecmo Bowl versus RBI, and he wanted some Tecmo Bowl discussion here. We touched base on it a little bit, but you had mentioned as a topic top 5 Tecmo Bowl players aside from Bo Jackson, and I would have to imagine that Lawrence Taylor has to be on the top of that. That'd be my number one.
Actually, I think at least in the original, because there's Tecmo Bowl and there's Tecmo Super Bowl or Super Tecmo Bowl, and the original only has like 12 teams, and the original or in the Tecmo Super Bowl has the entire 28 team, NFL roster. And then I'm never sure if people remember Tecmo Bowl or Tecmo Super Bowl, and I kind of get both mixed up. Lawrence Taylor is probably the best player in Tecmo Bowl, or at least the best defensive player, and defense wins championship. So I think that probably makes the Giants the number 1 team to play as in Tecmo Bowl. And because they have Phil Simms, so you have a competent quarterback, you have Joe Morris, who's a good running back, and you have Mark Bavaro, the tight end in that offense, who catches a lot of passes. And then you get unblockable Lawrence Taylor. And I mean, literally unblockable. He's programmed to be unblockable. Yeah. So I would much rather have unblockable Lawrence Taylor on my team than Bo Jackson. And that's sort of what I was getting into earlier, is that I really think Bo Jackson has become overrated in Tecmo Bowl because so many people talk about him and think that he's the best. And he is. He's really good. But I can beat you if you want to be the Raiders, Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, look at that video where Bo Jackson eats up the whole quarter of play with the running back and forth and backwards and forwards. So I'd imagine that's part of it too. You don't see a highlight reel of Tecmo Bowl sacks of Lawrence Taylor.
No.
So is there any other players worth noting? Because my memory is a little rusty of Tecmo Bowl, but I do remember
Randall Cunningham.
Okay.
He's basically the original video game Michael Vick. His QB runs are pretty unstoppable. I think Tecmo Super Bowl is Barry Sanders. He's also, he's just like real life Barry Sanders. He's better than everybody. And then on the Cincinnati Bengals, there's a defensive player named David Fulcher, who's a safety. He's actually one of the best players in Tecmo Super Bowl, and I don't think people really know who he is. He made like 1 or 2 Pro Bowls in his career, and rightfully so. Who the hell remembers anything about the late 80s, early 90s Bengals in 2015? But he was like a 6'3", 240-pound safety in the 1980s, and he plays like it in Super Tecmo Bowl. You can pretty much kick anybody's ass with the Bengals. Bengals are also, like, if you were ever to enter a tournament, like a Tecmo Bowl tournament or Super Tecmo Bowl tournament, Bengals and the Giants are typically 2 of the first teams picked off the board because of their defenders.
Okay, as I was trying to remember in Super Tecmo Bowl who would have been on offense for the Giants. Was that Otis Anderson?
In Super Tecmo Bowl?
Yeah.
It's like Rodney Hampton or something.
Oh, okay. That sounds familiar.
And Ed McCaffrey.
Okay. Yeah, I always forget that he wasn't always with Denver.
Yep.
Okay, is there anything else? Did I miss anything with the questions here? I think we got. Well, there was a video. Somebody was asking about RC Pro-Am. That was my cousin. Did you ever play that one?
Yeah, I have it. I actually still have a physical copy of it.
Okay.
That's one of the more popular regular Nintendo games.
Yeah. No, I remember the bullshit where there'd be that one car that would be able to just lap everybody, and you wouldn't even get to finish 2 laps. The guy would just.
Off-Road was my favorite racing car game. Still is. I would love to own an off-road arcade machine.
And the wife was talking about Dr. Mario.
Dr. Mario, that's always a fun one.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to remember if I actually had that or not, but I know that was one of my aunt's favorite games. That was one of the few games I can remember an older person wanting to play, but my aunt was, she enjoyed the Mario game. So anyways, all right, so we got the random questions here. We're going to start out with one that I know you get quite a bit on Twitter, so I figured we'd just get it out we get it out in the open right here. Norm's Gambling Club was asking why you promote a podcast that has a morbidly obese liar and Kermit the Frog on it.
I get that. I wouldn't say I get that a lot because the only person who ever asked me about that is basically Norm. But I think he's referring to Marco and Vegas Runner in that tweet.
Yeah.
And to clarify what he's asking why I host Gil Alexander's Beating the Book podcast on my website. And it maybe I don't know if like it's confusing to other people, or maybe I just don't talk about it much, but Gil's actually one of my friends in real life. So, and I enjoy his podcast. I listen to it. I listen to both his podcasts, the Beating the Book one, and I listen to his Guessing the Line podcast with Chris Andrews every week. And I like both of them, and I know what's up with Vegas Runner, and I know people have different opinions on Marco. And, even a lot of times, like I know Marco outside of, Twitter, and me and him don't particularly see eye to eye on some things either. But why do I promote it? I don't think I go out of my way to promote it, but I do host it on my site, which qualifies as promotion to people. So why do I do it? It's because Gil's my friend. I like his podcast. I like being a guest on it. And when Gil asked me to be on his podcast, I'm always going to do it because that's what I'm going to do for one of my friends. Okay. So, and the reason I understand, VR and Marco is maybe more of the issue than Gil. I don't know, but it's not my place to ask somebody else, to change their guess or to tell somebody I don't agree with the guests on their show. That's not my decision to make. It's not my place to tell somebody that they're doing what they're doing wrong. And, if Gil wants them on his show, it's his show, and I'm not going to tell him he should change that.
No, you're not going to stop him from doing
exactly. It. So, I mean, I have many people to worry about and things I don't like, and that's just not very high on my list. I don't really know what else to say. Like, I like the podcast. I listen to it. And if you don't think it has any value, don't listen to it, or do listen to it and then do the opposite of everything they talk about. Like if it's that bad, just do the opposite.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were willing to answer that or not, because I know that whenever he brings it up, it's kind of like ignored, but I didn't know if there was a rhyme or reason for that. But I guess the whole being a friend thing there's some that makes sense there. So
there's just I'm always open to answering questions on Twitter, and I enjoy engaging with people and discussing things. I just am hesitant to engage in Norm because there's really, there's no winning once you get into an argument with certain people. And it's like, I'm not going to waste my time, arguing with somebody. So there's just not much for me to gain.
Okay. And I'm not sure if this was sarcastic or not. Did you have money on USC futures? Because that was another topic that he had brought up. Was that?
Yeah, I saw that. I don't particularly know what he's talking about there.
Okay.
Other than I had made a USC futures bet at like 150 to 1 before, okay. I think it was before the Notre Dame game. And it was it was 150 to 1, to win the national championship, and it was based on the premise that they only have to beat UCLA this week to get into the Pac-12 championship game, and they're not going to make the playoff with 4 losses, obviously, but at the time, my thinking was they could still make and win the Pac-12 championship game and make the playoff. And talent-wise, USC's roster is as good as any team in the country. But I don't exactly know what that question is in regards to.
That's fine. Okay, let's go to Joe Bo was asking, how long does it take you to research the D2 college football games that you've had?
It really varies, but I'd say like 20 minutes to a half hour a game would probably be the high end.
Okay.
I mean, part of it's just gathering the pertinent box score data because it's not always in one place, or a lot of the team statistics, because you got to look at all that stuff just to kind of get an idea of what's going on. But I do those Friday evenings, or late Friday night. And there's no point in starting them earlier in the week because there's $50 limits or $100 limits, and what am I going to do? Like move a line a point or two on Tuesday or Wednesday? Like there's very little value in D1AA games at incredibly low limits. So you just got to wait and hope you can find the numbers you like on Friday nights.
Okay, and do you do this with anyone besides Five Dimes? Is there any other books you recommend for that?
I mean, there's a lot of locals that copy Five Dimes that'll post them with low limits on Saturday mornings. Other like major books that post them, not really. There's some books. I've talked to some people on Twitter about high school football more than D1AA, but there's high school games that like somebody's making lines on like LA City section games and like Kentucky high school football and stuff that like I don't have access to, and I would love to have access to it, but I can't figure out where they're coming from.
Yeah, I know, and I don't know if you did this when you were in high school, but it was probably outside of high school for me, but there'd be times where a Illinois high school playoff game would be televised, and I remember sitting at one of my friends, and it was halftime, and since I was covering some of these teams for the local newspaper at one point, I set like a halftime line for my friends, 2 friends to bet. One of them took Lamont, the other one took the other side. I don't remember who, and it ended up being pretty close. So you obviously Vegas knew, but did you ever set lines to like high school games while you were in high school or anything like that?
Nah, I wasn't. I actually wasn't very into sports gambling until maybe 18 or 19. I was into gambling as a teenager, but I was not smart enough to make lines at the time.
Okay. All right. The next question, this is near and dear to your heart, is from Necessary Paper. Best Cuban prospect and most underrated Cuban prospect.
The best Cuban prospect is kind of tough. But there were 3 guys I could think of off the top of my head that are 4 actually that I find particularly compelling. First one is Yadier Alvarez, who was signed by the Dodgers last year. He's like 19 or something, so he's 2-3 years away from actually pitching in the majors, but he's got a plus fastball, a plus off-speed pitch. Would have been probably the first pick in the draft last year. He should be pretty good. Dodgers also signed a guy this week named Yusniel Diaz. They paid like $15 million for him, and because they're over the cap, it's actually, it's 100% luxury tax. So they thought he was worth $30 million. He's going to be a center fielder in the majors, and he would have been the Series Nacional, which is Cuban Major League's Rookie of the Year last year, but he defected. right before the end of the season. He basically got about 3 times what the first overall pick in the Major League Draft got last year, but he's a couple years away. Most of the Cubans are a couple years away because of guys like Puig and Soler and Cespedes who have come up and have made an impact right away. A lot of players are now defecting earlier and earlier, so you're getting more minor league guys as opposed to the Alexi Ramirez's and Jose Abreu's who start their career in the majors.
Sure.
Norge Ruiz is another pitcher. I think he might end up with the Dodgers, but I'm not sure. He should probably start in Double-A. I know in 2013 he had 11 strikeouts versus a college national team that had Kyle Schwarber and Michael Conforto on him. So I actually kind of like him slightly better than Yadier Alvarez. I'm interested to see where he signs. And then there's Adrian Morhone. I think that's how you say his name. He's only 16, but he defected at 16, which is incredibly young. He already throws 91. He threw like 24 innings in Series National last year. He only had a 7-13 strikeout to walk ratio, but he had a 7-13 strikeout to walk ratio as a 15-year-old pitching against adults in Cuba. So with 91 mile hour fastball as a 16-year-old, there's a lot of upside there. But obviously a 16-year-old is several years away from making a major league impact.
Sure.
And then the other guy is Yoan Moncada, who signed with the Red Sox last year. I'm sure you can find him on Twitter, or find recent pictures of him. But he was supposed to play winter ball in Puerto Rico, but he decided not to, or the Red Sox decided not to have him play winter ball, and he's been just working out like crazy, and he is jacked. I saw the pictures of him a couple days ago, and first thing I thought is what crazy steroids is this guy taking? Because he looks like a linebacker. I'm actually incredibly excited about Moncada, and I think he might actually be up before the end of next season for the Red Sox.
Okay.
He's pretty good. So those are the 5 guys off the top of my head that I'm most interested in.
Okay. Well, and this might be a pod unto itself, but how the hell did you get so interested in Cuban baseball?
So that's actually it's a fairly easy question to answer, and it's sort of what it started as is because one of my I enjoy playing fantasy baseball, and I play in fantasy keeper leagues with a lot of my friends from college, and we're 7-8 years into a league, and we have a dynasty league, and et cetera. But the way I value players, especially in a keeper league, is you're always looking for the guys with the most upside in a keeper draft, once you keep your guys. And I remember when Yoenis Cespedes was the first, he wasn't the first Cuban player because there had been guys like Kendrys Morales and Alexi Ramirez who came before him, but he was the first of the the prospects everyone was talking about sort of era of Cuban players. And I don't know if you or anybody listening to the pod remembers when he defected, there was a video of him working out, but it was a very well produced video with star wipes and stuff of him doing squats and just lifting weights, and it was a very funny video.
No, I didn't see that.
So that was sort of what got me into the Cubans is I would start joking with my friends about how Yoenis Cespedes was the greatest player to come out of Cuba, and there was a story that he might have killed a man right before he defected in a car accident. So these players just sort of started they had mythical stories when they were defecting, and then Puig's story was pretty well known about paying drug smugglers to get out of the country, and then he had a pretty memorable first couple weeks in the majors, and his career hasn't really panned out the way most people had hoped since then, but you know, he's still a pretty talented athlete. And a lot of these guys, Soler was another one, had a lot of hype. Jose Abreu is basically the Cuban Babe Ruth. I remember talking with my friends before the season that Jose Abreu got drafted, and I was saying I'd take him with the number one pick in every non-keeper league I had, just because the upside with him is so immense versus whoever you're getting outside of your keeper draft. But that's basically how I got into Cubans, is that I was just scouting them when they were coming to the majors and for fantasy, and now it's just sort of become a gimmick that I don't mind being known as that guy. So I kind of just play up to it, and I would field a team of all Cubans if I could.
Yeah, I know, and I know you try to do that in daily fantasy.
Yeah, and I do that for fun mostly. I mean, I don't play daily fantasy to win the $1 million every day. I play mainly lower stakes daily fantasy, although I do know how to, and occasionally will script like 100 entries in in an NFL contest. But it's mostly for fun, and it's mostly just so I have a distraction for when I'm sweating out actual bets. I'd rather complain about DFS than live bet into a bad bet more.
Okay, and I guess that's optimistic way of looking at it. Yeah, that's probably a good way to look at it. So, all right, the next question here was about the Nugget Challenge, and I know it was the 50 nuggets in less than 20 minutes. It was from E. Stones, and have you done that, or did you do that today? You said you were going to do that today, I think.
We were gonna try to do it yesterday. East Ohms is actually my friend Ryan,
Okay.
from my real life, I guess. He's the guy who was challenging me
Okay.
to do it. I haven't done it yet. I got some chicken McNuggets last week because I hadn't had them in several years, and I wanted to see what they taste like and size and everything. I'm pretty sure I could put 50 down just because they're kind of tiny and tasteless and kind of gross, actually.
Okay.
You just got to cover them in sauce, and then I'm pretty sure I could take down 50 of them in 20 minutes. I don't know how enjoyable it would be, but pretty sure I could do it.
Yeah, and until I went through the drive-thru recently and ordered some, because we had a delivery order go bad, so the McDonald's is the closest thing to us. So I didn't realize how many different sauces there were. What's your go-to sauce with the nuggets?
Sweet and sour. That's I don't know what the other. I mean, I know there's like barbecue sauce, but
Yeah, barbecue's mine, but I didn't realize that there were so many different ones now.
Yeah, the new ones must be fairly new because I've never really tried them.
Okay. All right. So the next one was from Muck Nuts, and this goes along with your high school football betting. And this is in Illinois, so not sure. This has a little interest to me, but is Libertyville +8 the lock of the century?
I mean, as far as college or high school football goes, I really focus on only California high school football.
Okay.
So I don't know who Libertyville is or what division of Illinois football they're in or anything, but I did tail Muck Nuts on that play because he seemed fairly confident in it. I will look at it. I know it's a Saturday game, right? So I have some time.
I think because they play the day after Thanksgiving, and then on Saturdays is the higher classes. So I think they're in on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that. I actually don't think I've only bet maybe 5 or 6 California high school games this year,
Okay.
but I've literally not lost a game. So I will be putting my perfect record on the line with this game.
Okay. So you can sell your high school tout package.
Pretty much. And I mean the what's it called? I'll do the Texas high school playoffs all those games will be lined. So I'll probably take a look at those when it's Texas high school playoff time. But
Yep.
other than that, I mean, I do it for fun. I do it because I think it's easy, and I think the lines are fairly soft, even at minus 120. But I mean, it's nice because I mean, you can do them in a 5 dimes account on Friday night and use that money on Saturday or whatever. And the other thing with what do you call it, with the D1AA games and Division Two games, the other reason I really like those games is because they start at 9 a.m. on the West Coast, or 10 a.m. in some cases, and they're usually not televised, so there's no commercials. There's no TV timeouts, and people don't realize that without TV timeouts, football games go a lot faster. So
Yeah.
I can bet on these 9 a.m. games with what I think are soft lines, win some money. Hopefully, I've done pretty well on D1A this season, but I could win some money early in the morning and have that money back in play by noon. So it's a good way to get your money in play on good football games, or I don't know if good's the right word,
Probably not.
but
Yeah.
you can get a lot of money in play on these games. Well, not even a lot, but I mean, you can get $500 a game down relatively easy between two accounts or whatever.
Okay.
You get them down early, you get that money back, and you can use it for whatever college games you want to bet that afternoon.
See, that's
And
that easy.
it's that easy. And I hate the Big Ten. And usually West Coast morning football on Saturday is always Big Ten games.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, and I tend to lose money betting on Big Ten, so it's better just to ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd agree.
And the
Right.
college of the face scam was a good couple weeks. I'm sad they no longer line those games.
All right. So we have a group of questions here. One group's from Peasy here was asking. First question was, my friends think occasionally drinking vodka and Kool-Aid is ghetto. What are your thoughts?
I haven't drank vodka since I was like 16 and drank too much of it and threw up everywhere.
Okay.
So I don't drink vodka at all. I mean, I literally cannot drink it without vomiting everywhere.
Probably a sign you shouldn't drink it, I guess.
Yeah, it's scarred me for life, sadly.
Yeah, we all have that one alcohol that scarred us in our youth that we won't touch again.
But vodka and Kool-Aid, I don't know. I don't drink Kool-Aid at all with anything, so probably kind of gross.
Yeah, so kind of ghetto then. Okay. Why? And the next question is, why is it at less than $100 a hand are you guaranteed to have mouth breathers at the blackjack table?
Well, I mean, part of it just has to do with understanding that most people are stupid everywhere. I would say that even at higher limit tables, you still run into fairly stupid people. But in particular, I mean, you're playing with, if you're playing at a table at any strip casino, you're playing at any table in the regular gaming area, it's probably not filled with the most competent gambling audience in general. So, I mean, you're just taking your chances, and it's very frustrating. I don't play blackjack much anymore. But depending, you never want to be at the end of a table and having some idiot in front of you who doesn't know what he's doing. So I mean, that's just gambling in general. You'll typically run into, not smart people wherever you go, whatever game you're playing.
Yeah, I don't normally go to the casino, so the casino is kind of a thing I go to maybe once a year, if that. So
Sometimes I'll play baccarat at a casino just to, keep. I'll go to Vegas a couple times a year. I'll play baccarat just to keep the, get my points or whatever, because you don't get anything for going to the sports book.
sure.
But it's nice because I could sit there for an hour or 2 hours and just point at the cards and not say a word. And you really can't do anything right or wrong in baccarat except put your money on player or the dealer. So that's my way to gamble at a casino.
Okay. And his last question was, do you think hiring Down syndrome people to run the Braves is a good long-term strategy?
If anybody follows me on Twitter knows I tend to talk a lot about baseball, especially during baseball season. And I'm a full-time baseball handicapper during baseball time. I'm a
Viva,
Braves.
Viva
What?
love, Viva love first innings, by the way.
Right? Wasn't that great this year?
That was fantastic. I can't wait till April.
Yeah, I wish I could find first inning props on like Dominican Winter League or something. I would exclusively do that and ignore the NFL.
Yeah, but
But
I had to. Yeah, go ahead. I had to interrupt because of the first inning part. So
the Braves, I'm a Braves fan. I watch a lot of their games, probably like 120 Braves games a season or something. Although I will say at the end of this year, I kind of gave up on them down the stretch, and I was like, I'm tired of watching this shitty team. But I sort of understand what they're trying to do, amassing all this young pitching and getting controllable pre-arb assets. But watching them dismantle what was a fairly quality team to begin with, Justin Upton's a pretty good player. Jason Hayward is one of my favorite players personally, so seeing them trade him for one of my least favorite players was not very fun. What's it called? They just traded Andrew Simmons for I don't even know what they got, but it didn't excite me very much.
the Angels, right?
Yeah, they got Ibar and they got Sean Newcomb, who's like whatever, big deal, third pitcher maybe. But yeah, I don't love what they're doing, but at the same time, I know that the guys they hired, Capola and everybody, are competent baseball people. So, I'd like to think I'd like to think they know what they're doing, but at the same time, literally like 2 minutes ago, I just got a buzz that the Braves signed Bud Norris. And it's like, what are you fucking doing? Like, I hate Bud Norris. I would never sign him, never allowed on my team, you know. But so it's not going to be a fun year for Braves baseball. But I do think that like if I could place a futures bet that the Braves win a World Series in the next 5 seasons, I probably would. But that's mostly because I'm a Braves fan. I do think they will win a World Series at some point under this administration, especially if they get. I know they're very big on this Venezuelan 16-year-old named Kevin Maitan or something. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he's considered the best Venezuelan prospect since Miguel Cabrera, and the Braves are Braves have the inside track to sign him. So I'd like to see them do well. And I know they hired Kylie McDaniels from Fangraph to work in their front office, and I'm a big Kylie McDaniel fan. So I'm willing to punt 2016 if they're focusing on building a World Series contender in the future.
Okay. All right. The next set of questions from Thick Slicing. So, this is always good material. Why does your avatar look like bacon?
He calls it the bacon flower. It's actually a watercolor painting of a tulip from the 17th century called the Semper Augustus.
Okay.
And why is that my avatar? It was originally a picture of I don't remember what it was originally. It was the picture from the Church of the Subgenius or whatever, the Dobbs, I forget his name, Roy Dobbs or whatever. But after that, it was a Simpsons picture. But Simpsons pictures are basically played out on Twitter. So I eventually changed it to this several years ago. And I think my reasoning at the time, I had been reading about the Dutch tulip bubble of the 17th century and how the Semper Augustus was the most expensive tulip ever to, be purchased. And I think it had to do with the genetics of the tulip. It was bred from some other tulips or whatever, but it was a genetic mutation that produced the perfect tulip that sold for so much money. So I found at the time I thought it was an interesting story about how the perfect tulip could only be perfect by being imperfect. It was a genetic mutation that made it perfect and so expensive, and it couldn't be reproduced. And it just sort of, I felt there were some parallels to gambling, because people think that, perfection or being the best is attainable, which it's probably, perfection is never attainable in anything. But, to be perfect, to be the best at gambling, sometimes you have to be imperfect. And that, nothing, there's no one system and one way of doing things that guarantees success every time. And I just like the picture. I tried to change it once, and like somebody hit me up and was like, "Oh, I didn't know it was you because you would change the picture." So, I don't feel like changing it.
All right. Well, that was a lot more of an answer than I was expecting. So yeah, great. I wasn't expecting that to be a detailed answer, but all right.
Yeah,
So,
Dutch tulip, the Dutch tulip bubble of the 17th century is actually pretty interesting to read about. But
okay. All right. So the next one, I'm gonna like to say the F word as it relates to gays. But what is the most enumerate person the mainstream media put forth as a stat nerd?
Stat nerd.
That they put forth as a stat nerd.
The easiest answer is Nate Silver, obviously, but it's been done.
Yeah.
Brian Burke is interesting because like the ESPN QBR statistics are just so absurd, and
Does
like they
anyone,
had.
does anyone even know how they're calculated? It seems like proprietary to at least with the passer rating. It's not. It might not be the easiest thing to figure out, but there's at least a mathematical equation behind it.
Yeah, and I mean the QBR numbers are just like I remember there was something about Charlie Batch having a higher QBR rating than everybody else, or he's one of the top 10. One of his games is in the top 10, and if your model is projecting that, your model's wrong. I mean, I don't need to know what your model says to know that Charlie Batch did not have one of the 10 best games, under your model. That's just wrong. So I'd probably go with Brian Burke or ESPN. Ben Alomar, who also works for ESPN, has whatever their FPI, or they call it for NBA. It constantly projects numbers that are completely off with the market projection. And like what they say about, if you're projecting things that are, completely off with the market, you should be betting all your money on them.
Yeah, no, I remember one specifically that was pointed out. Obviously, hindsight 2020, people who are results based will be like, I told you so. But there was the early season game between the Warriors and the Rockets, and I think that model had the Warriors at like 67% when the line was Warriors minus 1.5 or something.
Yeah, I mean that happens a lot with their numbers, and that's that's one of the things that bugs me with ESPN is they're just willing to put up statistics and call them advanced analytics when the market does not agree with them, and the market's not most likely not wrong. and that stuff bothers me more than it should probably.
All right.
And just making shit up as they say on Twitter.
Yep, MSU. Yep. All right. So he has two more questions. Mary, fuck, kill, Schatz, Will Carroll, Barnwell.
I don't know Will Carroll. I know Barnwell and Schatz. Actually, I know them.
Will Carroll's the injury expert.
Yeah. I mean, I see people tweeting at him and telling him he's an idiot and everything.
Yeah, I think Grooven tweeted today about if he should have been able to project that guy getting shot last night.
I have to think about that because it's. I mean, like, I don't want to fuck any of them.
You could address that on Twitter if you want.
The thing I will say, sort of not necessarily answering the question, but just sort of pointing out something from my own, experience is if you actually go to footballoutsiders.com, I'm just making sure because I haven't checked in a while. But my name is actually at the bottom of that website. If you see, it says powered by Steinwein at the bottom of Football Outsiders. My partner in Spreadapedia is actually Football Outsiders, like, chief technical officer or whatever. And he got the job because I know Aaron Schatz and I've met him, several years ago, and I'm friends with him. And I see a lot of stuff about him on Twitter, and I know Seville does not like him, and I totally understand that, but like, they really go out of their way to shit on him and make his life, worse than it is. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I've pointed it out before to certain people who I talk to and have said, I think you should really lay off Aaron because he's not a bad guy. Like, if the worst thing you can say about him is, his analytics are shitty and he's a bad gambler, like that's fine. I don't know if you would necessarily disagree with that, but I mean, he's got a life outside of Football Outsiders, and he's got several personal things that make his life tough, and I don't like seeing people constantly shit on him. Like, it doesn't necessarily sit right with me all the time. And it's not just because Aaron's my friend, but it's more so just you're kicking a man when he's down, and I just don't like it.
Yeah, I don't, and I'm not going to pretend to know a lot of the history behind that stuff, that why they don't necessarily like him or why he might not be respected amongst the bettors that on Twitter here. But that's for another day. But we'll go into Lou's last question here, and that was favorite fast food drive-through order, and how much do you eat of it before you get home? I mean, because in Cali you have obviously the In-N-Out, but I don't know if there's anything else that is considered like a go-to for you.
Yeah, I'm trying to think because I like In-N-Out. It's not my go-to because it's not the closest one to me. There's a Taco Bell up the street from me, so they get a lot of business by default.
Sure.
Where else? We have Del Taco here. I don't know if Del Taco.
That's familiar, but I'm not. But I mean, if they have it around here, I don't need it. But that sounds familiar.
I usually get like 2 bean burritos at Del Taco, and a couple tacos, and then one of their quesadillas with a Mr. Pibb, because Mr. Pibb's my favorite.
I don't see Mr. Pibb around too much.
Yeah, that's too bad. It's getting replaced by Taco Bell or Dr. Pepper at most places.
Okay.
And that's not right, because Mr. Pibb is way better. And that's actually, I don't know if you know who Sports Cheetah is on Twitter.
Yeah.
He loves Dr. Pepper, and I love Mr. Pibb, so I always give him shit about how Mr. Pibb is infinitely better.
Yeah, that was actually another listener question while we started here, was from Henry Bolden, was asking if where does live tweeting his golf round with press and rank on sports events that you've attended?
I don't know. I mean, I've attended a lot of compelling sports events. That was a fun afternoon. Both those guys live relatively close by in Southern California terms, I guess.
Okay. So
Um,
have you met a lot of people because of Twitter?
yeah, I have. I think all sorts of people, not just other gamblers per se. I've met. I mean, and it's also because I've gone to a lot of things. I go to Sloan every year. I go to Vegas for the that Hilton kickoff weekend usually. I've met all sorts of people. Like even like it's funny because like I know like Seville and everybody they don't like Todd Furman at all, you know. And like I met him early on when I started gambling and going to Vegas, and like I'm not very close to him now, and I think he doesn't particularly like me because I continued to talk to Grooven Mahooven.
Yeah.
But I mean, I even learned a lot from guys like Todd when I was just starting out, and it was because they were nice enough to talk to me. It's hard if you don't know anybody. I mean, you're just doing whatever you're doing by yourself, and I was at least lucky enough. I met Barnwell when he was living in Vegas, and I would go hang out with him. I wouldn't say I learned particularly much from him, but like I got to hang out with him, and like it was better than nothing.
Well, Conk might disagree.
Yeah, it's to each his own.
I know. You're a lot of the people you hang out with or talk to in real life might not be like what people.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, a lot of these people might not be other people's favorites, but I mean, what it really comes down to is like my choice of friends or people I associate with is pretty irrelevant to anybody else. And I'm not the kind of person who's not going to be friends with somebody because somebody else doesn't like them. Like and don't get me wrong, I see all the time on Twitter what people are saying about other people, and it's fine, have your own opinion. I'm not going to let internet life, get in the way of my real life.
Yeah, and you're not going to engage in that either. So.
I will occasionally. I mean, there's certain people that I don't like. I despise even, but I just only have, I only have a certain amount of like capacity to hate people, and I'm gonna choose to hate certain people, for legitimate reasons. And if I just don't have the time or the energy to go around and hate everybody for everything. If you do, more power to you. I just don't have, I don't have the energy to hate everybody for everything.
Okay. And I probably agree with my guest too much here, but yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as far as, I respect other people's opinions, and there's some people I might respect more than others on here that, like, when it comes to a certain person that I might not know about. But yeah, I'll let them handle all of the the tweeting at people that.
Yeah, and like again, don't get me wrong, like I love Grooven Mahooven. Like I have no idea who he is, and I'll probably never find out, but I love him on Twitter. I love watching him argue with people, and he's not wrong. Like he might be an asshole sometimes, but he's not wrong. Like I love it. I support it. I like talking to him, and like I said, like Todd told me to stop talking to him because it was making me or my brand look bad, and I was like, no, like I'm not gonna change who I talk to because somebody else thinks it makes me look bad. I do all of this because I enjoy it, not because I make shit tons of money selling, access to my database.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're not gonna let him influence you, just like you won't let Seville influence,
No, but I do love, like, I enjoy conversing with them. I enjoy conversing with everybody, especially Seville. Those guys, I mean, I'll tell you, that was the hit at Sloan last year. I would go and talk to people who run, different websites and actual sports businesses. And they would all ask me, they'd be like, what's the deal with those guys on Twitter, man? Like, are they crazy? Or I like, nah, they're just, they're interesting people. And they are very interesting people. I enjoy the podcast with them. I enjoy talking to them.
Yeah, and they're pretty consistent with their views in terms of anti-tout, as far as I'm aware, as far as I've seen. But anyways,
And a lot of them actually, it's interesting, or at least personally interesting to me, is that a lot of the Seville guys were on the Tucker Max message board, which was
yeah,
probably now 10 years ago. And I've heard a couple of them mention it on your pod, that that's where they met or whatever. And that's also fascinating to me, because that's where I was on that message board back then. And actually it was a nice gambling board, and I learned a lot from it, as an 18-year-old who was just starting out. I learned a lot from, lurking and listening to those conversations. So it's kind of interesting now, almost 10 years later, running into the same people online and being, when I first started following them, I was like, I feel a familiar presence, sort of thing.
sure.
And, what do you know? These are some of the same guys from back then.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't get. I wasn't on any of those forums. I was a lurker on the covers forum, but obviously that's gone to shit. So, all right. So we're running long here, but there's a few other topics we could touch upon briefly. With Thanksgiving coming up, I need to get your power rankings of top 5 foods that you must have at a Thanksgiving dinner, and that can include dessert.
Well, I mean, obviously turkey is on the list. That's a given. In terms of like side dishes and everything, I'm a big fan. My grandma makes stuffing. I like her stuffing. Um, Sort of tough going down the list because it's all, generic
Yeah,
Thanksgiving side dishes. My grandma makes okra, which I don't know how unique that is, but that's pretty high on my list. She makes green beans and tomato sauce, which we call fasulia. I find that to be incredibly delicious. And what else? Pecan pie. I'm a big fan of pecan pie over pumpkin pie. And I don't know. I mean, Thanksgiving's whatever. It's all the same food more or less.
okay. I'd have to go, and this will be unpopular. I as picky of an eater as I am, I do enjoy cranberry sauce for some reason. So I would put that towards the bottom of my top 5. I don't know why I enjoy it. I do. Mashed potatoes has to have. I have to have some of those. Biscuits, turkey, and then gravy's not really a food, but gravy goes on top of almost all those things.
Right?
So yeah, and then not just to suck up to the wife, but I do enjoy the. I'm looking forward most to the cornbread casserole that we're gonna have at dinner tomorrow. So that will be one of the dishes to look forward to in my eyes. So all right, I'm gonna skip the top 5 traditions. So we'll get into your we'll end with your gambling stuff for the weekend. So you do have some Thanksgiving bets and some other stuff this weekend. So if you want to run through those really quickly.
I have the Lions in the morning.
Okay.
Then I have Cowboys at pick. I see that line's up to 1.5 now. I don't know if I'd play it at 1.5. I liked it at pick when I was getting even money. I think just on a yards per play basis, Cowboys with Tony Romo are probably slightly better than the Panthers. Although Cam Newton on turf worries me a little bit. I'm actually big on the Cowboys at the current odds they're getting to win the NFC East. I think that'll probably go down to Week 17. I think they will just sneak into the playoffs and win the NFC East with a 8-8 record or whatever. It's not like any other team in that division is any better than them. Um, but if you get them at 6-1 to win the division and you roll that bet over, a Cowboys Super Bowl would probably pay like 100-1 at that point. So I've got a position there. I've got a future. I've got Cowboys at 27-1 to win the NFC conference. I have them at 6-1 to win the East. I have them on Thursday to beat the Panthers, and I have a future, an exacta or whatever you want to call it, a Cowboys Broncos Super Bowl at like 72-1 or something. I tweeted it yesterday.
Yeah, I remember you. Somebody was asking how much you were even able to. No, I thought you said it was like in the 200s or something.
Nah, it has those bets have about $100 limit on 5 dimes.
No, I thought it was like more like 200-1 or something, but it was only in the 70s.
I have to go back and look.
I thought it was higher, but yeah, I remember you tweeting that out.
Yeah, it might have been higher. I have to actually look at that.
Okay.
But then in the night game, if the Bears get to 10, at 10 minus 110, I'll definitely play them at 10. Although I'm looking at Green Bay first half. That's an interesting game because it's a night game. So you got the whole third game of the night chase potential sort of thing, and no bookmaker wants to be sitting in an office on Thanksgiving evening worrying about Packer exposure. So I'm kind of assuming that line is inflated a little bit. I got it like when I made it was like Packers 7.5. So 9.5, 10 is definitely going to be a play on the Bears. That's a really interesting game for me. I mean, I'm a Packers fan personally, so I'm really looking forward to the Brett Favre jersey retirement ceremony and Bart Starr being on the field one last time. I don't know how much people have kept up with that story, but they're basically keeping Bart Starr alive with like stem cells to get him on the field, and it's actually
I didn't know that.
It's kind of terrible and creepy. He had a heart attack and a couple strokes, and he doesn't remember who Vince Lombardi is. He doesn't remember playing in the NFL, and they're flying him to Green Bay today so he can take pictures on the field with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers tomorrow. And that's actually slightly terrifying to me, as they're going to put this old man, with mental problems on a field in front of 50,000 people to take pictures that they will then sell, which is, again, why I don't really respect the NFL very much, because they'll put a man essentially with Alzheimer's on a football field tomorrow night so they could sell pictures to people.
Yeah, that's going to be at a local bar near you in about 5 years.
Yeah.
Autographed or something like that.
Well, no, I have a Bart Starr autograph. I have a jersey, or not a jersey, a NFL Hall of Fame jacket with like 40 signatures or something.
Okay.
I already got the Bart Starr, but it's kind of creepy. But I'm a Packer fan, and tomorrow night's Thanksgiving dinner is planned around the Packers game. I will probably wear my Brett Favre jersey to dinner for the first time since he's retired. It should be a wonderful night for Packers fans, even with the whole Bart Starr thing, Yeah.
No, and I'm glad that they did this matchup too, because being a Chicagoan, I'm not a Bears fan, but I do enjoy watching the rivalry games.
Yeah,
It's cool. It's cool that's on Thanksgiving because when the Bears play on Thanksgiving, it's usually against either the Lions or the Cowboys. But now with this new third game, they have this choice of who they can play on that at that time slot. So
then I have a couple other bets just to run through them real quick. There's some college basketball tomorrow, and Irvine is playing Boise. I think Irvine's getting 3 points. I very much like that bet. I will probably have just as much money on that as I do on any of the NFL games. And I know some people who follow on Twitter and whatever know that I do Big West basketball almost exclusively for college basketball. But I mean, Big West is one of my major markets, what I focus on. So I'll be paying attention to that. And then on Saturday is the Bayou Classic from the Superdome, which is Grambling versus Southern. That's Division 1AA football. I'm actually expecting higher limits on that game because it's a televised, fairly well-known game. I've bet on Grambling or against them almost every week this season. For some reason, they were just one of my teams this year. So I've been following them pretty closely, and I think they opened -5.5, and it already moved to 6 on a couple $50 bets or whatever. But I'll have Grambling -6 this weekend in that game.
Okay, and do they have over-unders for?
Yeah, the over/under on this game is like 82 or something, which is pretty typical of Southwest Athletic Conference games or whatever. That's the historically black college conference.
Yeah.
They don't play much defense. It's sort of like the Big 12 in that regard, is they just fucking 42 or 45-42 or 51-45 is a pretty normal score in a lot of those games.
Okay. So there no. So I don't know if you know the over under for that one. Is there any value in your eyes on any of those, at least at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I would play over 82 if I was playing it.
Okay.
I'll probably just stick with Grambling -6.
Okay.
But definitely I have looked at the over, and I might play it later on in the week. Then the other two games I bet so far are Auburn. I bet Auburn +13, and I bet it again at +14 versus Alabama. Because the way to beat Alabama is to beat them with a spread offense, and I don't know if Auburn's going to be able to do it, but I won't put it past them in a rivalry game like this, and I think 14 is too high for this game. So I bet Auburn, and then I bet Ole Miss when it got to -1 because it opened at 4, and all the money came in on Mississippi State, and it does slightly worry me. It's Dak Prescott's senior night at home in Starksville, so I'm not overly optimistic that it's going to be an Ole Miss blowout, but I do think Ole Miss is going to be up for this game, and they know that winning this game paired with an Alabama loss to Auburn will put them in the SEC championship game. So I will be playing Ole Miss -1. I don't know if I'm ballsy enough to play the Auburn money line though.
Okay.
But so that's basically what I got so far for the weekend.
Okay, and then there was I do remember a King of the Hill thing that you wanted. I don't know if you wanted to touch base on that question.
Oh yeah, Horace asked. What did he ask?
There was a marry, fuck, kill with Dale Boomhauer and what's his name? I don't have it in front of me. My King of the Hill is a little rusty.
I'd say marry, fuck, kill Dale, Bill Boomhauer.
Yeah.
I'd kill Bill
Okay.
because he's Bill. I'd marry Dale because if I married Dale, I could just go and sleep with other people and he'd never know.
Sure.
Boomhauer, I guess that leaves Boomhauer for the fucking part. I guess by default.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, no, he said it's a Dale sells guns and Peggy's bookstore episode, best episode of King of the Hill or not. That's a tough one. You know, all these best of or favorite questions are very hard. My personal favorite episode of King of the Hill is the one where Peggy falls out of the airplane skydiving and Cotton teaches her how to walk again. And I are you familiar with King of the Hill? Are you a big King of the Hill fan?
I've watched it sporadically, but I couldn't say that I'm a huge fan. But I've watched it sporadically. I don't remember that particular episode.
I tend to quote it fairly frequently on Twitter, and Midi and AG always tend to pick up on it more than most people. But the episode where Cotton Hill teaches Peggy how to walk again, and it ends with Cotton Hill telling Peggy to get out of her wheelchair so she can come dance on his grave is probably my favorite moment of the entire King of the Hill series. And Cotton Hill is my favorite character. He's very quotable.
Okay. I remember maybe it was because I grew up with Beavis and Butthead, and I took it out on Mike Judge, maybe, where I didn't maybe watch that show as much because he was focusing on King of the Hill instead of Beavis and Butthead, where maybe I had held some resentment. Maybe that's why I didn't watch that much.
I love Beavis and Butthead, by the way. The day I was like a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old and my older cousin called me and told me to turn on MTV because there was a show called Beavis and Butthead on that I had to watch, it was pretty much like one of the most important days of my life.
Yeah, I don't think that could be understated.
Yeah, like it was sort of like you lived your life in black and white and you saw color for the first time.
I remember having to sneak to watch that in the basement.
And now Beavis and Butthead is like PG-13 compared to.
Yeah, it's very tame. I mean, like Family Guy, had issues trying to get network TV, but now that's probably even tame compared to a lot of stuff.
My thoughts on Married with Children, and it's very similar, is that at the time, Beavis and Butthead and Married with Children was like the worst thing on TV, and today they're nothing.
Yeah. Yep.
Kids these days have no idea what we had to go through to watch some inappropriate comedy.
It's kids these days. All right. Anything else? I think we've gone long here, but I hope people enjoyed it. I know people stuck around here based on I was keeping an eye on that viewer count there, but any final thoughts here before we wrap things up?
No, I think we ran through everything. Like I said, I like talking to people on Twitter. I enjoy it. I do it for my own entertainment as much as, everything else. And it's always fun to be on your pod. And, I enjoy all of this. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And you can catch him at Spreadapedia. Thanks again for joining. And for those who listen to this maybe for the first time, if you let me know if this is a format that you'd like to hear more in the future where it's maybe not so sports betting centric, let me know. But Spreadapedia, once again, thanks for joining.
Yep, listen to the outro. It'll sum up my thoughts on the sports betting world pretty good if I think we're doing the one I want.
All right, and everyone have a great Thanksgiving. If you listen to this afterwards, hope you had a great Thanksgiving. And I will catch you guys next week or week after, or something like that. Have a good night.